I'm registered under APRA, right? I can lose my registration for this, 100%. But at this point, I feel like I've got nothing to lose because I will be unemployed at the end of this week anyway, right? So quite frankly, I don't give a fuck at this point.
One, two, you hear the clock ticking, tick tock. You about to stop living, tick tock. I want you to remember me, tick tock. But the dead don't have no memory. I'm coming. Nobody can stop me, nobody can hold me, nobody control me. I'm coming. I'm here to do my thing, I'm here to bring the pain. I'm never ever gonna change. I'm coming. Nobody can stop me, nobody can hold me, nobody control me. I'm coming. I'm here to do my thing, I'm here to bring the pain. I'm never ever gonna change. Like Tropicana, I got the juice. All for the least, they let the dog loose. Don't make me call up the crew. Now they getting scared, wanna call up a truce. I'm the one like Neo, cocky like.
All right, what is up, guys? It is me. It is MVP. We're here with another episode of the most valuable podcast. And it's valuable because everything and anything you hear is valuable for your life. And so I'm super excited to have a guest on right now. And her name is Sarah Hart. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. And it's cool because our connection, this is what I love about social media, is that it just connects you to the most randomest of people in random times. And like, I had just put out a post on my Instagram story, I think last week, and I was just offering up to have a conversation, you know, I just seen so much division with what's happening lately, and we'll get into that, obviously. And I just put it out there. I'm like, who's interested? Who wants to come on? Let's have a chat. Let's share some awareness. Let's share some knowledge. Let's educate each other. And so I had a friend who had a friend who is friends with you. So the connection has been pretty cool. It's like,
here we are.
Here we are. Now we are meeting up for a chat, and I'm excited to learn and to be educated from everything that you're about to share. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for making the time. I guess we'll start with, could you just give us a little bit of background of yourself, what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. I am a registered nurse and have been for 30 years, and most of my career has been in critical care settings and largely in anaesthetic nursing. I did 10 years of intensive care as well, so I've had a lot of experience in different departments, pretty, intense experience throughout the career. And I last year during COVID, I've been an agency nurse for 30 years. For 25 years, and that means that during the height of sort of COVID and hotel quarantine and the hospital shut down last year, where they were only doing emergency surgery, that I had to look for alternative employment. So I ended up working in hotel quarantine for a few months before I switched back to my normal role. So yeah, I've had a pretty diverse career and am sort of have been kind of well experienced in this whole COVID thing. And, all of this last year and up until now without a vaccine. And due to the mandatory vaccination laws, I have chosen to opt out of this system at the end of this week, because it's not in my best interest to participate in this experiment, and I will officially be unemployed.
That's crazy. That's crazy. There's a lot that you just mentioned there. If we can just go back to when this whole thing first started, right? Last year, I guess, what was your initial thoughts when this first came out, and is it the same now? Obviously it isn't, but like, what kind of were you always like this from the beginning, or did did things happen along the way that made you change your perspective? Does that make sense?
Yeah, look, I guess I've probably been more on the skeptical side of things from the start, just because I had an experience a few years ago, totally open. I had breast cancer in 2014,
Wow.
which then I had surgery and treatment for, and that sent me down a journey of looking at how I could, never get a reoccurrence and be the healthiest that I could be from that point of view, which kind of led me into researching a lot about health and well-being. And, I found a lot of medical experts, particularly overseas, who are into the microbiome and much more holistic kind of health viewpoint.
Yeah.
So when this all started and there was, massive alarm bells about this pandemic that was going off, I was immediately connecting with these people who I had already had an awareness of, getting their take on it. So it was certainly didn't instill in me a sense of panic. And I then started to, I was watching with interest what was happening with the media and the narrative that was being created and the hysteria that was being created. And I watched that evolve whilst being, fully exposed to this thing. And I couldn't reconcile what I was seeing in the media and what I was hearing with what was actually happening.
Yeah.
And, obviously, if you go back 12 months where there was a state of panic and we were setting up for this massive influx of really sick people based on what was going on overseas, and, our government were talking about creating 4,000 something ICU beds and preparing for an absolute disaster, and it didn't happen. I was not surprised. And then there was a period of time where I wasn't employed in the hospital system because I, as an agency nurse, we're basically the first ones to be picked off, as sort of backup people. Which led me into hotel quarantine, which was a whole nother headfuck, quite frankly. It was an incredible experience in learning just how the government works, how the DHHS works, and the incompetence of the whole system. And then getting out of that and back into the healthcare system, back into my normal role, and watching this play out has been really interesting.
You mentioned the hotel quarantine, and this is hotel quarantine where people who test positive for COVID, that's where they go, right, for at least a couple of weeks.
Well, that was initially, it was just anyone who was coming back from overseas had to go into hotel quarantine for 2 weeks. My last appointment was in a COVID positive hotel. So you might remember when the towers in the public health towers went into lockdown. People were given the option of either staying in their units or going to hotels, and so they were confirmed positive cases. It was also healthcare workers at the time who had tested positive in their hospitals also had the option of going to hotels. So they were coming to us and being cared for as confirmed positive cases. There were actually 2 hotels at the time in the city. Throughout the whole program, I think there was something like 25 hotels participating, but there were 2 confirmed positive. And that was the last place that I worked in that program was one of those.
Yeah, and you obviously are not vaccinated against COVID-19, and so did you feel at risk at all?
Not at all. At no point have I felt at risk, and that's because I am very aware of how to support my immune system. I'm a fit, healthy individual who has gone down the road of, having cancer and having to look at ways to ensure that I can support my immune system, my health, to prevent anything, making me sick again. And I'm not arrogant to think that I can't get it. Like, I may have already had it, but I just don't know. So I'm not saying that I can't get it, but the chances of me getting sick from this are probably on par with getting struck by lightning. I had a call from a friend a couple of days ago who said to me, "I'm really worried about you because you could die." I'm like, it doesn't even make sense to me. The chances of that happening are just so remote based on the science.
Yeah.
But that is the sort of hysteria that's being generated by the media, by the medical fraternity. Like, it's being generated in hospitals as well. I work with these people every day. They, it's just like this relentless pressure in order to get everyone vaccinated. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I guess, what are the conversations that have been happening at work? Like, when you're at work, like, do you run into other nurses who share the same opinion as you?
I'm definitely an outlier. And, those of us who feel that this is not something that we want to participate in are undoubtedly the minority. And where, it's got to the point now where we're seen as uninformed. We're labelled as anti-vaxxers, and that's not at all what I am. Like, I object to that label. I object to the inference that I am against vaccination, because I'm not. Like, I am fully vaccinated for everything else. My kids have been fully vaccinated. My kids have gone independently and been vaccinated against COVID-19. And I've deliberately said very little to them because I don't want to influence them with my opinion. They are, I'm sure, well aware of where I'm at. But my intent and my role is not to tell anyone what to do, but to be as fully informed as possible. So if someone does ask me, I can say to them, well, you need to consider all of the options and the risks and the benefits, and make that decision for yourself. But at work, I'm seen as an anti-vaxxer. That's it. If you have the opinion that you don't want to participate in this program because it is a medical experiment until 2023, and I don't feel that anybody should be telling me what I should inject into my body, and I certainly don't feel that I should be given an ultimatum to make that happen. I'm so passionate about this. I just think it's completely wrong. I think people are really misguided in allowing this to happen. And, being anyone that is on board with it is to some degree complicit. Right. But that makes me a complete outlier. And, I can't tell you the number of people that I have lost along the way, which is distressing.
Yeah, it's crazy, like how you say all of that. And a lot of the people are so uneducated on this. Like, you mentioned, you had a situation in your life with breast cancer, which, man, like that, or just right there, you fighting that, it just tells me the type of woman that you are and how strong you are. And that led you to researching all these different types of things. Yeah. A lot of the people nowadays aren't willing to put in that work. They're willing to, like, well, this is what Dan Andrews has said that we have to do. This is what the media is telling me I have to do. So that's just what I have to do. Nobody is willing to do the work. They're willing to take somebody else's word for it. And that's the most frustrating part. And you mentioned this is an experiment until 2023. How on earth does anybody think it's okay to force an experiment on people? We're losing friends, family, jobs. Like, it is unbelievable to me what is happening here. And I'm like you, I'm not against the vaccine. Like, if that's a choice somebody wants to make for themselves, sure, go for it. Yeah. I'm okay with that. But to force it, because I lost a job last week too because of this. And so I'm kind of like in the same situation as you, in trying to figure out what to do. And I just think it's crazy. And I agree 100% with everything that you're saying.
Yeah, it's tough because you know, I've had a lot of support, but I would say I've received private message. I'm very public about my stance.
I've seen.
I know, but I think it's important because there are a lot of people who are kind of either on the fence or they don't want to speak up because they feel like I'm registered under APRA, right? I can lose my registration for this, 100%. But at this point, I feel like I've got nothing to lose because I will be unemployed at the end of this week anyway, right? So quite frankly, I don't give a fuck at this point what happens on that front. I am now defending every Australian's right to choose what is right for them and to maintain agency over their body and their fundamental right, human right, that we have to choose what goes into our body without coercion and without any other influence. It just blows my mind that people think that this is okay. I just can't accept it.
Yeah, I'm with you. If we can go back to the hotel quarantine thing just for a sec,
Sure.
Did you write a letter to Dan Andrews?
I did. Yeah.
Can you share that?
Yeah, I like this was after several months of working in hotel quarantine and this particular the second positive hotel that I was working in was set up relatively quickly. I was working for an agency with a whole lot of agency nurses, and it just was an absolute shit show. There were a whole lot of people working in that hotel who were for DHHS because they basically headed it up. Those people were not health professionals. They'd been pulled from other industries, like they were ex-flight attendants.
Wow.
And, you know, all sorts of other positions to be basically team leaders and coordinating this effort. The nurses themselves, the agency nurses, and I was one of that team, were the ones who were providing the clinical support to the guests in those hotels. They weren't called patients, they were called guests because, yes, they had COVID, but they were still there voluntarily, sort of. And then the admin staff were all DHHS, and I just cannot impress on you enough what a shit show that was. The standards of infection control were appalling. The training was almost non-existent, and
wow.
there was so many risks associated with that I ended up. I wrote to Daniel Andrews with a list of concerns, and it was, you know, point form concerns. And the next day, I received a response from the Commissioner of Corrections Victoria, because at that stage, the police were not yet involved in security. It was still the hotel, you know, the security staff who were originally employed were still there. So basically, the government subcontracted the security operation to a company who apparently then subcontracted to someone who subcontracted to someone else. So by the time we got those people in those roles, they were not experienced at all in security. They were literally just people who applied for this job with no experience, who came along with no training in PPE or security.
That's crazy.
Who ended up in these roles, as were the cleaning staff. And you can imagine you're working in a positive hotel environment.
That's
so
crazy.
you assume that every room that you go into is covered in this virus, which is so freaking deadly, right?
Yeah.
Now, the guests were asked at the end of each day to bag up their rubbish and drop that bag outside their hotel room into the hallway. And I remember going to the head of infection control, who was employed, along with the DHHS, saying to him, I have serious concerns about the standard of infection control. There's not an infectious bin on every floor level in this hotel. How is that okay? There's, there people dropping their infectious rubbish out into the hallway, onto the floor, where we're going to be walking around. Like there were things like that, details like that, which just blew my mind. And there were many more things about their processes and their procedures which were so deficient. They were changing daily as well. If we needed something, it was a matter of we needed to report to the person in charge, who would send an email to someone else, who would send an email to someone else.
Yeah.
And maybe we would get a response, maybe not. Classic example, there was a woman who was pregnant, and she was having abdominal pain and bleeding, right? I had been off for 2 days. I came back and someone said to me, this is what's going on. And I said, why is she still here? Why is she not in the women's? Why is she not being transferred out? Oh, because the doctor said that it was okay, we'd just keep an eye on her. I'm like, I'm sorry, that is just fucked up. If that woman has a miscarriage, can you imagine the shit that you're all in? That's not fucking okay. You need to call an ambulance right now and get her out of here, to get her ultrasounded to see if she's having a miscarriage. And like, that's the sort of language that I had to use to make things happen.
To get the point across, right?
And there were several other episodes like that where I actually walked up to the person who was in charge of the shift from the DHHS, who was not a medical professional, and said, if you don't do what I'm suggesting you do, and someone comes back and sues you because of what could happen, everybody here is fucked, including you. You need to listen, and you need to do this. And because these people aren't trained in medicine or the hospital system, they were just following the guidelines of what they've been given by bureaucrats. I understand that, but like it was just too much. So yeah, hence my letter and my response from the Commissioner of Corrections to let me know that these things would be happening. And actually, I went to work the very next day, and all of the security staff had been replaced by police. There were police everywhere, and the security staff were gone, which was good, except they actually didn't know how to handle the situation either. And then I had the most intense situation that I've ever had in my life with a patient. And I won't go into the details because it's too distressing, and it just... I sat with this woman in the foyer of this hotel for an hour and a half, and she didn't have a mask on or whatever. She was highly distressed, and understandably so, given the scenario that she had been through. And she was wanting to leave, but because she was confirmed positive, she either had to be in the hotel or back in her apartment in the the complex. At this point, she was just going nuts, and she wanted to leave because she couldn't stand being contained. And I was sitting there begging her quietly to just go back to her room, because if you don't, you are going to be arrested. They are going to handcuff you and throw you in that van outside, and I can't do anything about it. And literally an hour and a half, and that's what ended up happening anyway, because in the end, I could not keep going. And they did. The police handcuffed her and arrested her and put her in a van. And if I could tell you the story of what had happened to her over the previous weekend, you would understand why why I was so distressed by that. Sorry.
No, you're all right. You're all right.
And people don't get that, and the dysfunction of this whole government and the mismanagement of that and the whole thing. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're all right. And the whole mismanagement of this whole thing, the evidence is clearly there to suggest that our leadership has absolutely failed us. We are the most locked down city on the planet right now. And like, if that doesn't tell the people in power making decisions that they've absolutely failed us, I don't know what else would.
Well, I'll tell you what else does. The fact that now government employees, including police and others, are now exempt from the vaccination mandate.
That's crazy.
Now, how is it that I was at a peaceful protest recently and we were surrounded by busloads of police who were enforcing this bullshit when we were sitting on the ground quietly just saying, we're just making a point. Those guys are enforcing these ridiculous, directions on us, and yet they're exempt from having to comply. The double standards I just can't even, in the last few days, that is just massively fucked up. And people are still telling me that I'm wrong, that I need to go and get vaccinated, that I need to stop telling people, stop sharing my opinion on social media and just go and comply. Like, I'm sorry, something is terribly wrong there.
Yeah, and it's like, why would I shut up about this? Like, if you're so passionate about something, like, why are we telling people to it makes no sense. You talk about the protest, because I attended one as well, and that also has caused a lot of division. I see online is like, protests do nothing, you're wasting your time. The protest is the reason why the lockdown is going to extend.
Oh, 100%.
Like, you've heard all this,
I'm super
sure.
spreaders, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Like the guys at the protest. Like the guys at the protest are the ones getting tested and making these numbers go up.
Yeah.
What is your experience at the protest and your thoughts on it being effective? And because when I see it online, it looks like a freaking movie. Like, especially the ones where it was getting pretty violent. And obviously the media, like we talked about earlier, the media will paint one side of the story to paint a narrative, which of how people who aren't educated and just take the media for its word. What's your take on the whole protesting thing, and what is your experience?
Well, I for a start, I stopped watching mainstream media very early on because I saw the bias because I was working in it. Like, I knew what was going on with the whole system, and I could immediately see the bias. I've been to 2 protests, and the first one that I went to was the first one at the Shrine of Remembrance.
Yes.
And that actually, it started out as a relatively peaceful protest. People were not there to make a big scene. Yes, they wanted to be heard, but it was literally people, quite a few people were on their own. And I remember seeing police picking off people in that early crowd and literally surrounding them. So there might be a bunch of police walking with one person who was saying to them, I'm just here exercising. That's all I'm doing. I'm just out exercising. But they were tormenting them and harassing them. And that sort of, that was early on in that particular protest. Fast forward to an hour and a half later, when it all had escalated and masses of police had turned up, and the mounted police turned up, and people started to get really agitated, and then it just escalated into violence. Those same people were the ones who were pinned down on the ground, calling out and in defence. And they were picked on. They were absolutely picked on. It was, it was really, again, badly managed. And they were, that was appalling. The second one that I went to was a couple of weeks ago when the bunch of nurses were protesting Fitzroy. And actually, that felt much more impactful because it might have only been 40 or 50 of us, but everyone was there with the same intent of causing no harm to anyone. We socially distanced. Almost everyone wore a mask, and I don't actually normally wear one when I go out, but out of respect for all of those people and to not agitate things any further, I wore one. And we just sat there quietly and watched as the police arrived. And it was crazy, the number of police that turned up. And the person in charge of that particular, exercise, the police had a conversation with one of the nurses there, who then called us all together and said that we were free to go without being arrested, taking into consideration that who knows whether we were past our 10K limit, I don't even know. So we decided that we'd made our point and disband. But on the way up, there was a Channel 7 reporter there who was trying to get the attention of someone to talk to. Nobody spoke to him at all. People ignored him as we walked past. Arby from Rebel News was there doing his thing, and people were talking to him because I think he shares a much more open dialogue and both sides. But when I saw that on Channel 7 that night, it was a very different story. You got the supporters of the AFL Grand Final, who were a big group of loud Melbourne supporters, not socially distancing, walking around the tan, and that was okay. And then they flipped to us in Fitzroy, socially distanced, peacefully protesting against these mandates. And we were the ones who were, causing all the trouble. Like it was just insane the way that they perceived that. I think it's something that I don't regret participating in, and I would do it again, absolutely. But mainstream media has a lot to answer for in giving a really dishonest representation of where the thought process is at for a lot of people. Because, if you listen to some people, 99% of people are on board with all of this. And they want us all to go and get vaccinated, and they want us to do, just participate in this experiment, and, we should all just be on board. But that is actually not the case. So I'm in contact with a lot of people who share my opinion. I know that that's not the case. The narrative that is being spun by media and by a lot of other people is not 100% correct.
Yeah. And it's like, for me, like when with the restrictions and all that, I can honestly say that I've never really, gave into any of that. I've just been living life. Like, I'm not going to let somebody tell me what time I'm allowed to go outside and what time I have to be back inside and how far I'm allowed to go. Like, so I just been living life. I was still able to work, and like people were hitting me up like, why are you going to the protest? I'm like, why not? Like, it doesn't affect me, but what affects me is seeing how it has affected so many other people. And if that doesn't move you, like, one of the things that people say is like, but that's not your problem. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Wow.
Their problem is my problem. Our liberty is bound together. So like,
correct.
like it's so frustrating for people to just sit at home on their couch and complain about the people at the protest who literally are going for those people sitting at home on their couches. Like there's no
Yeah,
selfish motive that any of these protesters have other than fighting for freedom of our people. And that irks me in a way. Like when I went there, it was like one of the most amazing experiences that I've ever had.
yeah,
Just
you're right.
everybody with the same cause, the same purpose,
Yep,
marching, chanting freedom, chanting save our kids.
yep,
Um, like, man, that was so emotional for me just to be in the middle of that.
100%.
And I'm like you, I don't regret it at all. And I will go again.
Mm, yeah. And
With
even, you know, that silent protest where we were sitting there saying very little was just so profound. And I know that there are other people out there who would go if they weren't so fearful. But there are a lot of people who fear, you know, going outside of their 10 or 15K
Yeah,
zone. And so they will comply. They fear going outside of they fear not wearing a mask when they go outdoors because, you know, someone's going to look at them sideways or they're going to be like, I mean, I don't fear that, you know. I know that this is fundamentally wrong
yeah,
and that eventually the situation is going to change as this state of emergency ends on the 16th of December, if it's extended past the 21st, and we assume that it will be. But, you know, I feel so strongly that this is so fundamentally wrong that I'm okay with getting fines and I'm okay with being reprimanded and I'm okay with losing people along the way who are compliant because they're scared. I understand that people are scared, but if nobody speaks up against all this bullshit, then nothing's going to change, and we are going to end up with this situation for the rest of our lives. I cannot live in a world like that. I can't live, you know, knowing that I didn't try. I'm
yeah.
not going to
I get it.
die knowing, you know, that I just complied and I didn't stand up for my fundamental rights and those of other people who feel that they can't. There are a lot of people in this situation, and it rolls over into other aspects of my life in wildlife rescue. You know, that whole sector is now massively affected, and people are running around like headless chooks, not knowing what to do and not knowing what they can and can't do, and it's just insane.
Yeah,
There's so little direction, so little leadership in all of this. And someone has to be a voice to just say, hang on a second, like it's just my opinion. Like I'm
mm,
no authority on any of this. I've just happened to have done research into into the legislation and into the research of the pandemic and the virus and all that sort of thing. But that does not make me an expert. I'm not saying that I am, but I just I feel it's really important to have an opinion and encourage other people to express that and do what's right for them, and don't just be shut down or told what to do and so go do it. That's
yeah,
very dangerous.
yeah. And you talk about the fight, and it's like, yeah, we're fighting for what's happening right now, but the fight's so much bigger than just that. Like we're fighting for the generations that are coming after us.
100%.
It's not even just about us. I mean, I look at our kids. I have nephews, and like I got asked, why I have no kids, and I'm like saying, well, the way the world is shaped right now,
Oh, who
and
would
the
want
way that
to?
it's heading, I do not want to bring a kid and then leave him in this shithole. Like that's
No,
just not what I want to do. I'm not like no. Like I have
totally.
nephews and nieces who like with these restrictions is like they're not allowed to go to school. Well, how we're relying on the parents now to become, qualified teachers? Like
But not only that, the impact of that on, on kids is profound. They're missing out
Absolutely.
on so much in terms of social interaction and support, and they're frightened. They're following this mainstream bullshit as well, and they're becoming even more cocooned than they were before, and you're creating this whole generation of frightened kids who are not sure whether they can go up and hug their friends as they naturally would.
Yeah.
Just that, they can't play, they can't socialize as they normally would. What are we doing to them for this whole generation? I mean, it's just, the impacts are just immeasurable.
It's so crazy. And like in the beginning, I was like, I wasn't sure about the whole thing. I did chuck on my mask here and there, but then once it dragged on into lockdown number 2, that's when things started going in my mind. Like, hey, no, there's something off about this.
Yeah.
I had an auntie who passed away, and our whole family gathered together, and we were having a family service in the house, and the police came and broke that whole thing up.
God.
Like, we're in the middle of a family service, and now everybody's just been kicked out in the middle of one of my auntie's sisters pouring out her heart and soul, crying about how, that right there was like, nah, this just is not right. I had a sister this year who was supposed to get married. Her wedding was Friday. They announced a lockdown Thursday night. We had people flying in from Brizzy, had to leave ASAP. Otherwise, they'd have to quarantine back home in Brisbane. And so, like, I've seen the effects that these restrictions have had, and it makes no sense. I'm going to the supermarket. There's literally like 60, 80, 100 people in there, but we can't go. We can only go to a wedding with 10 people. Like, none of this makes sense.
Exactly.
Funerals can't even have like more than 10 people. It's like, hang on a
look,
second. Go on.
I'm with you. I had a battle. My dad passed away in July this year, and it was a very quick. It was a very quick process from when he was diagnosed to 3 weeks later when he passed away. And the battle that we had in a private hospital in Melbourne, of having our immediate family with him. And like, I'm a pretty ballsy person, and when I
Love that.
I've just come up with this don't fuck with me attitude because it works. And at that point, I had to do that in order to just get them to allow us, immediate family, 3 days to be in hospital with him until he passed away. They gave us grief because it was, against COVID policy. I'm like, for fuck's sake, he's dying. We know that. So can you just shut up for a minute and just let 5 instead of 4 people, which is your policy, into the room, And in the end, I actually had to put in a formal complaint to the palliative care team in the hospital, who, to their credit, were amazing, and must have intervened somehow. And I was able to be there with him when he died with my daughter, which is, great. But I just think of all the other people that I've heard of in this sort of scenario who have had relatives die and they haven't been able to be there, or they've been permitted 1 hour visits before that person's died. Like that makes no sense to me. That whole fucking system of not allowing people to be in with their dying relatives. Nobody should ever have died alone in hospital because of this fucking virus in any country, anywhere in the world. That's just the most fucked up thing, for someone to die alone. I've held a lot of hands of strangers who have died in hospital, and fortunately, as a registered nurse, I've been able to do that, and I connect with every patient that I look after. But for someone to not be able to have their family members present, or, you know, like people who are having babies to be restricted with, you know, in all sorts of ways because of this, is just absolutely ludicrous.
Mm.
The impact is just so astounding. And what for? For a virus which 99.5% of people recover from.
That's the crazy part.
And yes, some people undoubtedly have long-term effects, but throughout this whole thing, and this is one of my biggest things, there has been absolutely no campaign to get people to you know, move towards being healthier. You know,
Exactly.
I stopped the other day and I took photos of the queues in KFC and McDonald's of people lined up to get their junk food, right? And no judgment there. If you want to have that, knock yourself out. But the fact that there has been no actual public health campaign to encourage people to change their behaviour to then be in a better position to fight this sort of illness, because this is not going to be the only one we have either. After this, we face flu season, and despite the fact that the government and hospitals say that nobody's died of flu or anything else this year, you can bet your ass they have, right? Flu is still around. More people die of cardiovascular disease and diabetes and cancer and other related things. Millions of people die all over this planet of all of these other things every year. COVID is a fucking fraction of deaths per year. But nobody, literally nobody, is addressing that situation in terms of encouraging people to, you know, to be healthier and get healthier and take care of themselves, and look at the underlying cause of why we're in this shitful mess in the first place, which is because we've abused our bodies and the planet to such an extent that this has been able to take hold. Rant over.
I love it. I love it. I love it. When you say you're passionate about it, I feel it. I
Sorry.
can hear it. And no, it's amazing. You know, I just wish people were more passionate about this and more passionate about doing the research. And it's crazy, like how you mentioned the survival rate of this disease, because so much energy has been put into the vaccine to the point where it's like no jab, no job. I'm like, well, where's that energy for like people who are dying from suicide? Like, why aren't we putting that same energy into those people who need the support right now? Because you've locked them up and they can't see family, they can't go to funerals, there's no weddings. Like, where's the energy, the same energy that you're putting into the vaccine going into that? Like, it's so frustrating. You bring up KFC and McDonald's. Back home in New Zealand, they're literally giving out KFC packages if you get the vaccine. Like, that is like, I mean, is
that's a whole nother level of headbutt, really.
And then there's freaking like the enter a draw to win $1 million if you get vaccinated.
I heard that last week. Yeah, Lotto. It was advertised on the radio.
I've never seen like in all my years living, and like, since when did we have all these famous athletes doing ads and stuff like, we're getting vaccine, you should too? Like, the amount of energy that's going into getting people to get the vaccine is just insane to me. And I still can't believe how people don't see anything wrong with what is going on. Like,
and as if that's not political.
Rant over.
Right? As if that's not political, right? It cannot, it's like, it's so illogical to think that this is about health. It's so friggin' not. You know, everyone says, oh, you know, you do it because you do it for community and we're, you know, it's the right thing to do. I'm sorry. How? Explain to me. How is that the right thing to do? How is it that I'm doing it for the community? Like, it just, it's so crazy. Yeah, it is.
All right. Well, I got one more question for you, and then I'm gonna give you the last. Anything else you want to add? Because I feel like we can go on forever and ever and ever, and possibly maybe we'll do this again.
That would be fun.
Yeah, I think this conversation has been pretty amazing, to be honest. And so my final question that I have for you before I give you the floor to share any final thoughts. You're about to be out of a job Friday.
I am.
Now, I've seen so many people who it's so heartbreaking when I see people posting up on their Facebooks and their Instagrams and like, I'm only here because if I don't get this jab, how am I going to feed my family? Like they've been put into this position, and I get it. Like, you know, I get why they had to make that decision, even if it's deep down in their heart they know they don't want to. I totally understand their stance on getting it, but you're about to be out of a job, and I guess my question for you is, how do you remain positive in knowing that's what's coming your way? I mean, you've obviously had to go through a lot to become a nurse, a lot of schooling, like you put in a lot of time, effort, and sacrifice into becoming a nurse. And now just like that, they're saying, well, piss off. If you're not going to get it, stuff you. I don't care that you've worked here for 30 years and you've done all this for us. I don't care. Like, how does that make you feel? And what plans do you have to kind of help you when you officially become unemployed?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I'm a pretty philosophical person, and when I determined that I was not going to go down the compliance route, I thought, okay, so there's a lot of chatter, a lot of conversation from a lot of distressed people who are floundering and panicking about what they're going to do. So rather than just, go down that road, I thought, okay, so how can we support each other? Like I do a fair bit of voluntary work, and so
Nice.
I'm of the mindset that everything in my life has always worked out, and I try and be positive about things and be supportive of other people. So I'm in this position, other people must be in this position as well. So how can we band together and recreate what we're going to do? Obviously, I could be deregistered for this conversation, and I'm okay with that. That's no worries. But I'm going to have to earn an income somehow, and I'm fortunate in the fact that I have great purpose in life with wildlife rescue, with my involvement in that whole side of things. I also have a small business and have had since 1994, where I make stuff and sell it, and that's
Nice.
it's a little side hustle, and I love it, and I've got some loyal clients, but that's definitely not going to pay my mortgage
Yeah.
and other things. So I just was trying to think outside of the square. Okay, we need to support each other. So using social media is a really powerful tool. I've discovered that, particularly since the bushfires of 2020. And so yeah, I put a post out on a social media platform to say, let's just get together and try and form some sort of alliance so that we can work together and collectively work out how we're going to earn an income from here. So there's a group of us a couple of girls in particular, Sally and Ren, got on board straight away when I put that post up and said, okay, we're also going to be unemployed, so how can we help? And we've formed, I have the Independent Health Alliance Victoria, which is a group where nurses and allied health professionals can get together to put out there what they're prepared to do and try and find employment opportunities from here. We've got a website which is going live in the next couple of days, and we're having regular meetings with people just to chat to them about what they can do here on. We're trying to get people to be creative, really, because as registered nurses or physios or dietitians or whatever all of these people are, or medical secretaries or, you know, ENs, whatever, we all have we've been in these roles, but we also have a lot of life skills and we have other things to offer. I think it's encouraging people to think outside the square and work out, you know, how we can put ourselves out there within the constraints of all this bullshit moving forward.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's our thing, and I have now a registered. We have a registered business. We've got a website, and we're going to be moving forward with that and involving people wherever possible to create new opportunities for employment outside of the whole mandate thing.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, and you know, I wish you guys the best of luck with that. And it's great to give our people, you know, options, you know, because a lot of people don't know what they're going to do. They're not going to back down and take the vaccine, and there are people out there who are like, you know, and then when they see something like what you're doing, which will be perfect for them, and so yeah, let's do a good job at putting that out there, and I definitely will share it around
Thank you so
when the
much.
website goes live. And
yeah,
but yeah, I guess that's it. We'll close off there, but I'll give you one last word before I do that. I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on. Is Sally? That's the one that connected us, right?
Yeah, Sally.
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
she's awesome. Like she's like the like she's the sales admin force of our little group that
Yeah,
we've
I almost
started.
forgot her name, and then when you said it, I was like, "Oh, that's the one.
Yeah,
That's the girl."
Sally
So,
Ray. She's an amazing force of energy. Actually, we met for the first time this week, Sally and
oh,
Ren and
nice.
I, and like the energy there is infectious, and we just have so many ideas buzzing around our head. Yeah, we just share the same purpose in wanting to connect with like-minded souls and generate new opportunity for people.
Yeah.
Rather than just, you know, panicking and you know, submitting because you think that that's your only option. If not, we want to be the supportive, you know, collective force that creates something new.
This is it. I'm actually so excited for you guys, and
Yeah, we're
but yeah,
excited. We're excited because we, you know, new opportunities are presenting themselves every day, and like it's yeah, it's. I think, you know, you put energy out there, and you attract that energy back, and it's just like, yeah, we're a force.
yeah. Well, thank you for showing up, for showing up for the world in the way that you are, and you know, there's going to be a lot of people that will thank you for the work that you're doing. And again, I just want to thank you for coming in and sharing your thoughts and sharing your story. And I feel it's very educational and insightful for people. If you're listening to this, I hope that this has kind of helped you and maybe even gave you confidence to stand your ground with your beliefs. I think it's important to note again that Sarah is not anti-vax. She's pro choice, but she also respects the decisions of those who want to take the vaccine. And so
100%. And I say to people, you know, people ask me regularly whether they think they should. And I say, look, you need to just weigh up the risks and benefits and do your research. And if you think that that's the right thing for you because you have chronic diseases and you're more at risk, then absolutely go for it. I'm not telling you what to do, ever. I've never told anyone what to do. But I also want people to know that there is a supportive group, you know, behind you if you're of the same mindset as us, who are absolutely against being forced to do something that we disagree with, and that you're not alone, and that we have this network of people who is bigger than you know. Despite some of the conversations that I've had in the last couple of days to tell me otherwise, I know I talk to people all the time. So, you know, it's out there, and we're there for you. That's it.
beautiful. All right, I'm gonna give you the last word. Any last parting farewell words? You want to mention anything that you've forgotten that you want to make sure that you say?
Oh, well, look, I think it's important that people just bear in mind that the state of emergency officially ends on the 16th of December. So the 21st of this month, it can be extended one more time. And then, you know, if you look at the legislation of the Public Health and Wellbeing Act of 2008, it stipulates that 21 months is the absolute maximum for this state of emergency to be extended to. I actually did speak to a politician today, which was pretty enlightening and pretty disappointing. There is new legislation being drafted, which will be introduced at some point in the next few months. And it's like I'm at the end of that conversation, I'm unsure as to whether Daniel Andrews is going to be able to do something to extend the state of emergency beyond the 16th of December. But basically everyone's sort of hanging out for that date because according to the legislation, if everything plays out the way it should, all of these mandates that have been imposed on us will be repealed and the whole situation changes. So it's going to be a really unpredictable, volatile time until mid-December. And, you know, if everyone can just hold out till then, like, I mean, I need an income as well. It's really frigging difficult, particularly for a lot of people who live week to week, paycheck to paycheck. But, you know, if people can try and hold out till then, you know, ring your bank and put your mortgage on hold, or ring your real estate agent and say, I'm really struggling. I've lost my job. I need some help here. You know, just swallow your pride and reach out to every avenue. Get onto Centrelink. Do all of those things that are available to you for support, because we've all paid taxes for however long. We now deserve to pull all that back in without guilt and be supported. And, you know, find a tribe. Just reach out to your community and know that you don't have to be alone, you know, particularly those people who are at home with a lot of mental health issues and anxiety and that sort of thing. I really feel for them, and I want you to connect with a community who is there for you and supports you through this absolute shitstorm, knowing that you're not alone, and you know, there is someone there to listen. That's it.
Beautifully said. Well, thank you again for coming on. We got to do this again. Maybe we can get Sally on here too. We can have a nice little three-way conversation there. I think that will be fun. But thank you again for coming on.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it a lot.
Oh, awesome. It's been I had a lot of fun tonight. I think it's been a great conversation. Thank you again.
Thank
you. Yeah.
Hey, peace.